Hi, everybody. Welcome to this video on paper 2, question 4, where we will be looking at the DBE exam paper from November 2023. And so paper question 4 covers analytical geometry. So we're looking at perpendicular and parallel lines. We're looking at midpoints of something. We're looking at the distance. We're looking at angles. And then, of course, we're looking at circles with centers at the origin and elsewhere. Now, question 3 covered more grade 11 analytical geometry, and question 4 covers more of the grade 12 circle analytical geometry that you would have learned this year. So let's jump in. Here's the question. It says, in the diagram, the circle with center 0, or O, has the equation x squared plus y squared is equal to 20. Okay, so that's important information. Then it gives you that the center of the circle, the big circle, is G, which is T and 0. A common tangent touches the circles at D and F. Okay, so we have to think about all the tangent theory that we know as well. And then, of course, it's given that D is a point on the circle with the point P and -2, and it lies in the fourth quadrant. So that tells us that your X is positive, but your Y is negative. So the first question says, given that D is P and -2 lies in the smaller circle, show that P is equal to 4. So we know the smaller circle equation is x squared plus y squared is equal to 20. And what we're going to do is substitute in our D coordinates and then solve for P. Okay, you can see it's 2 marks, so it's a pretty straightforward routine sort of question. So we'll have P squared -2 squared is equal to 20, right? And so we'll have P squared -2 squared is 4, so we'll have +4 here. It's equal to 20. We take 4 to the other side, becomes -4. So we have P squared is equal to 16. And so we have P is equal to the square root of 16. Or if we simplify that, plus or minus 4. Now, because we know it's in the fourth quadrant, we know that it is a positive X. So therefore, we can say P is just equal to 4, and as shown above. Okay, so your marks here is 1 for substitution, and then, of course, 1 for finding the p-value. The next question says, E is 6 and 2 is the midpoint of DF. Determine the coordinates of F. So the first thing we think of is the midpoint formula. And we know that the midpoint of DF is x1 plus x2 over 2 and y1 plus y2 over 2. That gives us the coordinate, but we already know what the coordinate is. We know that it is 6 and 2, right? So what we do is we substitute in our D value. So our D we know is 4 and -2. So we're going to write in 4, and we're looking for our Fx, right? So we're going to put that in, and we're looking for the Y of our F coordinate, okay? So again, the Y coordinate of D is -2. We don't know what the F coordinate is for Y, and 2. Now, essentially what this does is it breaks up into 2 separate equations. So what we'll have is 6 is equal to 4 plus x2 over 2, and we'll have 2 is equal to -2 plus y2 over 2. Right, and so if I just simplified this equation to get rid of the 2 at the bottom, I'll multiply out. So I'll have 12 is equal to 4 plus x2, and I'll take the 4 to the other side to become -4. So x2, or in other words, xf is equal to 8. And here I'll do the same thing. So 2 times 2 is 4, and then I'll have -2 plus y2, take the -2 to the other side, becomes a plus, so I'll have 6 is equal to y2. So our coordinate F is 8 and 6. Okay, so the 3 marks. one for the method, in other words, the substitution in, and then one for each part of the coordinate that you have found. So one for the x value and one for the y value. All right, remember, if you would like to look at these longer, you can always just pause the video and finish off your sum before continuing. It's also sometimes a good idea to try the sum before I show you the solution and then work through the solution with me to make sure that you've got the right answer. All right, question 3 says, determine the equation of the common tangent df in the form y is equal to mx plus c. So when we see y is equal to mx plus c, we know that we need to find our gradients, and we know that we need to find our y-intercept. And we have two coordinates. We have d and f. So d we found is 4 and minus 2, and f we found to be 8 and 6. Do you see how the answers follow on from each other in this question? Okay. So let's first find the gradient. So we know gradients is change in y over change in x, right? In other words, y2 minus y1 over, sorry, that's in terrible x, x2 minus x1. Okay, so substituting in our coordinates, we've got a 6 and an 8 minus minus. I do it this way just so that my pair works, because sometimes I mix it up and I substitute in the wrong x or y value and I confuse myself and I get the wrong answer. So this way I make sure that my 6 and my 8 go together, and I put in my minuses, and then I do the second one. So here I've got minus 2, so this minus becomes a plus, and plus 4, so the minus stays, and I've got it like that, right? So here I'll have 8 over 8 minus 4 is 4, and so the gradient is 2. Okay. Make some space here. So now we've got y is equal to 2x plus c, and we just substitute any coordinates. It's always a safer option to substitute in the one that they sort of gave us rather than the one that you found, just in terms of accuracy. But either of those coordinates are fine. Okay, so 2 times 4 plus c, that gives us minus 2 is equal to 8 plus c. Bring the 8 to the other side, becomes minus 10 is equal to c. And now they've asked it for in the form of y is equal to mx plus c. So we're going to say y is equal to m is 2, x minus 10. So that's actually the final equation. So where do we get our marks? We get our marks for substituting in our d and f coordinates. We get a mark for the gradient that we found. We get a mark again for substituting in either of the coordinates d or f, and then of course a final mark for the answer that we wrote down. So it's very important to make sure that you've written down the answer that they are actually asking you for. It's great to do all of this work, but you lose 25% of the marks if you forget to write your actual line formula. Okay. Now, the next question says, calculate the value of t, show all of your working out. So I looked at this from several ways, and there are 2 different ways to answer this. And what I'm going to do is actually use the tan gradient method. Okay, and so if you look at this, we know that the gradients of the tangent to a circle is perpendicular to the radius. Okay, that's part of what we know both from analytical and Euclidean geometry, which we should have covered at this point in the year of grade 12, right? And so we know if it's perpendicular, we know that the gradient 1 times gradient 2 is equal to -1. So to find our gradients of fg, what we're going to do is say if gradients of df is equal to 2, then the gradients of fg is the negative inverse of that. So that's -1/2. And what we mean by negative inverse is we pop it underneath 1, like that, and we add a negative. If it was negative, we would delete the negative. I just want to erase that so I don't confuse everybody. Okay, so we've got the gradient. Now we need to find the line. And so our line we know is y is equal to -1/2 x plus c. And the only coordinate that we have that would work for this, because we don't actually know g, is f, which we found to be 8 and 6, right? So what we're going to do is substitute this in. So we'll have 6 is equal to negative a half times 8 plus c. So 6 is equal to negative 4. Half of 8 is 4. And we'll take the negative 4 to the other side, so it becomes plus 4. So that is 10. So now we have our line equation, which is y is equal to negative a half x plus 10. Okay, but that isn't what they've actually asked us for. They've asked us for t. And we know that the g value, which we've been given, is t and 0. And we're going to use this information to find t. So if we think about the line is crossing, the g coordinate is the other part of the line. So if we substitute into this line that we've now found, sorry, I didn't want to write y, I wanted to substitute into y. So y is now 0, right? 0 is equal to negative a half. We don't know t, so we're just going to put in t plus 10. So we take 10 to the other side, it becomes negative 10 is equal to negative a half t, right? And now to get rid of the negative half, we divide both sides by negative a half. And so we'll have 20 is equal to t. Okay, so pretty straightforward. It's a nice way of doing it, not super complicated. All right, so marks here, 1 for finding the gradient, 1 for finding or substituting in your f here into the line to find your c value, and then 1 for finding the t at the end. Okay, so not too bad, not too complicated. Right. Now, the next question says, determine the equation of the larger circle in the form ax squared plus by squared plus cx plus dy plus e. Okay, so the first step we need is actually to find the radius of our large circle, okay? And we know that a circle that has an origin that is not at the center is given by this formula here. Okay, so before we start anything, let's start there. Okay. Now, we know two things. We know f, which is 8 and 6, okay? And we know g, which is the center of the circle, which we found in the previous question, which is 20 and 0. So we can quite easily see that we can substitute this in. So f will be our x and our y, and g will be our a and our b value. Okay, so it'll be 8 minus 20 squared plus y is 6 minus 0 squared is equal to r squared. And we'll just chuck this all into our calculator, marvelous thing. And what it will give us is r squared is equal to 180. Okay, so the next step is now to find the form of the circle. We already know the center, so we're just going to rewrite the equation. We're going to have x minus 20 squared plus, now we know y minus 0 is just y, so we're going to have y squared equal to 180. But this is not in the form that they've asked us. So what they're asking us to do is actually to multiply it out, and that's what we're going to do now. So I like to call it the Mickey D's rule. So it's going to be x squared, and then x times minus 20 is minus 20x times 2. Do you see that's the McDonald's arch there? Is minus 40x. And then minus 20 squared is 400 plus y squared is equal to 180. And now we're just going to rearrange the equation so that it works according to this. So what I'm actually going to do is be very, very lazy. And I'm just going to say minus 180 is equal to 0. Okay. So now if we rearrange this equation, it's going to be x squared plus y squared minus 40x. There's no actual y value here, so we can ignore that one. And then 400 minus 180 is 220. The magic of a calculator in the background there. And so that is your final solution. Okay, so again, where do you get your marks? Your first set of marks is your substitution of f and g into this formula here. The second one is to find the value of r squared. The third mark is writing down this equation here. And the fourth mark is your final answer, this one here. Okay, so pretty straightforward, quite a nice question. All right. The final question says, the smaller circle must be translated by k units along the x-axis to touch the larger circle internally. Calculate the possible values of k. Okay, and at first glance, this question looks awful. I mean, what do they mean? But if we go and look at the circle here, we can see that what they're saying is to take this part of the circle and shift it inside our larger circle. Okay, so the first amount that it's going to move is this amount, this distance here, where the circle touches the x-axis. And if it continues shifting, which I haven't actually done here, is to move it across to the other side, so to touch the edge of this circle. So essentially what they're asking you for is the point between where this circle is between these 2 points, okay? And so what they want is the x-intercepts here, and then to subtract this circle or add the circle into that value, and that will give us how much it needs to be shifted. Does that make sense? I hope it makes sense. All right. So the first thing that we're going to need to do is to find the x-intercept. And we already have the circle equation. We know it is x squared plus y squared minus 40x plus 220 is equal to 0, right? Now, because it's the x-axis intercept, we know that y is 0, so I'm just going to leave it out. So it's going to be minus 40x plus 220 is equal to 0. And here what I'm going to do is use my substitution formula. And for this, I'm actually going to pull up my calculator so that you can see how it works. All right, here we go. And so now what we've got is the formula that we're going to substitute in. We know the formula is negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2. Okay, so our b is minus 40, our c is 220, and our a value is 1. So here we go. We're going to substitute it in now. Just going to switch off that annotation. Right, okay. So firstly, we need to make a fraction. Oopsie daisy. Start again. Make a fraction, right? Negative b becomes negative. I'm going to do it the long way. You can, of course, say negative times negative is a positive and not type that in. Up to you, okay? Plus or minus, I'm just going to put in a plus to start. Square root of negative 40 squared minus 4. A is 1 and b is 220. Okay, press your down arrow key and put in 2 times 1. Okay, so our first solution is 20 plus 6 square root 5. And if we think about the large circle, it's on the edge, on the outer edge, on the further side, on the right-hand side. Okay, now instead of having to type this all back into your calculator, press your left arrow key to tell it you want to use this expression again. Say second function and your left arrow key, and that will take you right to the beginning of the expression. And that will put you much closer to where we want to delete this plus sign, which is the backspace, and add in a minus instead, and then just say equal. So instead of having to retype the entire thing, it's just a nice shortcut for you. Okay, and so we can see it's 20 minus 6 square root of 5. Okay, so now that we've done that, let's go back to our question here. And so what we found is, okay, so we had x squared minus 40x plus 220 is equal to 0, right? And we found the two x's. Those x-intercepts are 20, plus 6 square root 5, and x is equal to 20 minus 6 square root 5. Now we need to find the size or the radius of the smaller circle, right? And so we know that the smaller circle is given by x squared plus y squared is equal to 20. So the radius of the small circle is going to be the square root of 20, right? Which basically is 2 square root 5. And you can just chuck that into your calculator as well. All right. Now we need to subtract. So we're going to say 20. So k can equal 20 plus 6 square root 5 minus the radius of the smaller circle, right, is equal to 20 plus 4 square root 5, or k is equal to 20 minus 6 square root 5 plus 2 square root 5 to add the edge of the circle in, right? And so we'll have 20 minus 4 square root 5. And then if we just chuck this into the calculator, which I'll do, but you can leave your answer like this as well. So the first answer will be 28, 94. And the second answer, I'm just calculating it quickly here. Changing signs. There we go. So that one will be 11,06. That's a 0, by the way. Sure. Great handwriting. All right, guys. So that is probably the most complicated version of this. And so your marks here will be finding your x-intercepts over here, and then finding the radius of the smaller circle, and then your final answers over here and over here. So that's your k value that it could possibly be. Okay. I hope that that was a helpful session and that you were able to understand the questions that were required. So join us for our next video on question 5, where we will be answering trigonometry, which is always a fun one. Cheers for now.